Welcome back to KTN Morning Express with me, Edith Kimani. Now, if you're just joining us, you missed a very interesting first half of a discussion on ICC, particularly the situation in Kenya, the one remaining now. And before we went on a break, I did tell you the figures with regard to the ICC. It has 34 judges, over 700 staff, and an annual budget of $166 million. And the question I asked before we went on the break is, could this money be redirected to do other things? For example, setting up local tribunals. Matsanga, what is your view on this?
Exactly. In fact, if I was given power in the world, I would dismantle it very quickly. Because the way Fatu Besuda and the OTP have operated, Kibera Court is better.
Because
this is my summary. Kibera Court is better because the chief prosecutor in Kenya who wants to prosecute you, the police even look for forensic evidence. These ones came to visit hyenas, in camps, take our sunshine and go back, and then created this problem. People would not be pointing fingers at Gertrude as an NGO. It is because of OTP. If I had powers, in fact, I would give back to national mechanisms which are better. And that is what Uganda did. Let me tell you why we are off hook of ICC. Mm-hmm. When we went to Juba, I went to Juba to negotiate the Uganda peace process between Konyi and Museveni. We did that negotiation. When we saw ICC going to take us the route Kenya is being taken, we created what we call special division of the High Court of the Republic of Uganda. There is no Ugandan, even in Matsanga you see here. If I'm caught against fighting, against ICC creating crimes, I will never go to ICC.
Okay.
I will be taken to Kampala, charged there, imprisoned in Kampala. Kenya, because this question, people are going to ask us, what next? Kenya should move very fast now to close this type of headlines you see here, to create a special division, the Chief Justice, the DPP, the Attorney General, instead of flying here and there. Let them sit down, create a special division of the High Court to stop this woman from Gambia coming here again.
Okay, Matsanga, let me just take you on that right now, because the Kenyan Parliament has tried and failed to do exactly that. Now, in February of 2009, the Kenyan Parliament voted against the establishment of a proposed tribunal, which was to be made up of Kenyan and international judges. In November of that same year, Parliament began debate on another constitutional amendment to form a local tribunal, and that debate has never concluded. What makes us think that now will be different?
It is now. It is needed now. You can't run away from it. To stop Besuda.
Was it not needed then?
Can I tell you one thing?
Yes.
Why Besuda is coming back all the time, knocking on the door? We don't have local mechanism. You must charge some people who actually carried machetes on Naivasha Road, cut people. We have not charged a single person. And do you know what they call in conflict resolution? Redemption strategy. We must have a redemption strategy. Kenya must begin now so that Besuda, in this ruling of Kenyatta, usually why people hate me, I tell the truth. This ruling of Kenyatta is simple. She will come back if you don't create a local mechanism.
Okay, then let me direct
Kenya
this question
is on the right direction.
Let me direct this question to Professor Macharia, because Millie Odhiambo was here this week, and I posed the same question to her, and she said she doesn't think, in her opinion, that under this government that we're going to see a local tribunal created. Do we expect that this will be the situation for the rest of our lives?
No, it can be done. It's a very easy thing to do. Just convince the MPs to behave properly. Do the right thing. It can be done. There is no problem about that. And the arguments that have to be made should be solid as to why we need a local mechanism. There is blame to go around for everybody. I think the coalition government failed us. The Nusumkate government, because there was information that these things were happening, and very little was done to stop these things. That's why we had those things. Had action been taken at the right time, I doubt whether we would have had what we did, what we had. So there is room, there is time for the members of parliament, all of them, not looking at the party argument. It is the national interest. And it is in the national interest to create that mechanism such that no Kenyan should ever again be sent to a foreign court to deal with matters that are local.
Okay, and in your ideal situation, would it be a local tribunal made up of Kenyan and international judges, or is it one in the situation like we saw in Rwanda, where it's a temporary tribunal but run by the ICC?
I would rather if it was run by Kenyans. It's a Kenyan affair. But it may require some little time, maybe transition period. In that transition period, you may have one or two people from somewhere else, people of credibility, people of stature, for the transition period. But ultimately, it should be a Kenyan court dealing with Kenyan issues, and not a court directed or guided by some foreign entity somewhere.
All right, and Gertrude, because you're constantly looking at this situation from the perspective of the victims, does that sound like it's even doable? Will it make a difference?
Well, you know, there has been a conversation around the International Crimes Division of the High Court, and it's, in my view, in quite advanced stages. The only thing that we keep saying is that can we come out of these consultations and too many meetings and get the International Crimes Division in place? And when you look at the statement of the president, especially after this decision was made, you actually already see him being very conscious about the plight of victims. And anything short of that, short of this International Crimes Division, then of course I go back to agree with Matanga. It still leaves the country in a volatile situation in terms of allowing the ICC still, because we are a state party, to come back and in case of any situation, God forbid. But you want because when you look at the decision that has been reached, the withdrawal decision, you actually even see the judges themselves saying that in case you will find more evidence, then you are free to come back and prosecute. That if you want to look at it and equate it to the local way that we deal with the crime, the criminal process, then it is a discharge actually that our president has. It is not an nolle. There is no nolle prosecute that has been entered. It's a discharge, and therefore it still leaves him in a volatile situation. And who knows? We want to appeal to the president and of course his leadership to see through that this division comes to fruition. But more importantly, for organizations like myself, we say it has to have a human rights, it has to look at all the entire human rights agenda, because you want to look at issues such as survivors of rape and all that, who will really need a human rights face to that particular court. And another thing, we have very formidable recommendations made under the TJRC report. There is a strategy for reparations. How about we deal with that? Because we know government said it will be under the cohesion ministry and something like that. It just remains words. Can we put this into action so that we can authoritatively say we are in charge of our own situation?
Okay. Matsanga, going back to the headline in the Star newspaper today, let me see if I can get that page. There we go, and I think we can have a copy of that on the screens shortly. Uhuru not yet free, and this is a declaration by the Chief Prosecutor Fatu Bensouda, who has filed a fresh appeal over Kenyatta Records. Now remember that in making their decision to withdraw this case, the judges also said that Fatu Bensouda could not ask the Assembly of State Parties to intervene with regard to Kenya's relation and how they were dealing with this court. How do you think this is going to go? Does this come as a surprise to you?
No. The court, you see, Bensouda messes, as the professor said, all along. She messes. If I were Bensouda, I would have just terminated these things and started my things, my different way of doing things.
What do you mean? Like let go of this case altogether and start afresh?
Because the judges found, and the lawyers here, let me read for you this small one. The court found lack of due diligence on the part of the chief prosecutor in pursuing investigations and seeking cooperation of the government of Kenya. Doing so and explicitly dependent upon Kenya's government compliance with outstanding cooperation requests only after investigative avenues proved fruitless. Look, you know English language. The chamber found that the prosecution genuinely considered such compliance to be so central in establishing the charges in this case. The chamber would have expected the matter to be vigorously pursued at a much earlier stage. Close my case. Even if you go there 1 million years, you not get anything. Because they failed. This headline, of course, Star writes headlines. I don't take it at a serious paper because I know the owner. In Uganda,
let's not even get. No. I will not allow Matsanga. I will not allow you to go
the
there.
Star writes those type of headlines. That's why the Standard has not written, and the Nation.
I really will not allow you to go there.
I'm not going. Let me finish my statement. I'm sorry about the Star, but because it has targeted me of late too much since
Matsanga, I will mute your microphone.
Okay, Edith, the seriousness of the matter is this: the court has already made the lower court, the trial chamber, has made its verdict against the prosecution. They failed. They should have brought these things much earlier. They were given 6 years. 6 years of people milking the cow. You know, there are some people who milk the cow. My sister has never milked. But there are some people who have been milking this cow called ICC. They go to hike, they ask for more dollars. They are given. They go here, they are given. Open Society Foundation, they are given. Now let me bring you down here. What else will you expect the appeal chamber to say?
Okay, Professor, I want you, I know when Matsanga was making his point, you had something to say. I'm very curious to know what you had to say.
No, the unfortunate thing about Bensouda's next step is that it makes her to appear to be a very vindictive person. Despite the evidence and everything in front, she sounds as if she has a personal agenda, a vendetta, which is a very unfortunate image to acquire, that she seems to be pursuing something which is not necessarily connected with the case. And
well, some people might argue that she's resilient, that she's not letting this go until all avenues have been completely closed.
Well, it's her right to pursue the matter wherever she wants, but it's also expected that there will be common sense along the way. And then there are some things you just don't do.
Okay. Assuming that her appeal goes through and the judges in the trial chamber B actually say, okay, we've given you permission, your appeal has gone through, you are now able to take Kenya to the Assembly of State Parties. And the Assembly of State Parties actually does sanction Kenya to provide this said evidence. Do you think it will make a difference in the case?
Not much. I don't think so. Let me finish there. I don't think so. In the first, look, the judges took longer than they had said they would. They said they would give their position in 3 weeks. It took them more than a month. And I think maybe there were debates within the court among themselves. Do we just terminate this thing over because it makes no sense? Or do we give something to Bensouda so that she has something to hold on? Or do we go whichever way? And I think they compromised somewhere. So there's no case here. And but just withdraw, just to, for the fun of it. But that does not mean that you cannot come.
For the fun of it.
Yes.
For the fun of it, Professor.
To help Professor and Gertrude will agree with me. Don't be misled by the headline. They are not taking Uhuru Kenyatta.
No, they're taking the Kenyan government. That we're clear on.
That is the point I want to come to.
We're clear on that.
We are very happy. African Union ourselves, let's clash in that in that State Assembly. In fact, this is the end of ICC. If we go to State Assembly, the whole world will see that Kenya has friends. One, you will not prove that case in State Assembly. You cannot just come with a small note from, no order from the ICC, go and open Gertrude's bank account, get details, run with them around the whole London or the whole hedge. No. What the AG was telling the court, and which all of us will support in the State Assembly. That's why I told people, this State Assembly of New York, when they changed the program, I cut my journey from London to come back. They said there's no agenda on Kenya. I wanted to be there to defend. The AG was telling you, get me the order. So I go to the local mechanism. I ask the High Court judge to allow me to go into Kenyatta's bank account.
So you actually don't think that even if we get to the point where Kenya is summoned by the Assembly of State Parties, that even if...
we shall win, do you know how? We shall win resoundingly.
But Matsanga, weren't you also of the opinion that Kenya would be successful in their bid to, get the prosecution in front of the ASP? Remember, Kenya
Do you know what? For me, I have advised, and at times, Gertrude will help me on this one. I have advised, don't waste time. Let's look for Article 112 of the Rome Statute. It's clear. Independent oversight mechanism. We file Kenya as a state, and I'm giving free advice to Anthony General here. Instead of running to New York and this and running everywhere, Kenya has a right to file an application to the president of the court under IOM, Article 112 of the Rome Statute.
Okay.
I choose the chief prosecutor of misconduct. Then we finish. But this running around, it will bring this case back. Because Kenyatta is not involved in this. It's now the state. And when you involve the state, somehow you detach Kenyatta. Because Kenyatta is the head of state.
Okay, let me get to Gertrude, because the court has been very categorical that even when the president was in court, he was there in a personal capacity. In fact, I remember in 2010, the applications by Stephen K., who is a legal representative for Kenyatta, he had to stop addressing the president as President Kenyatta and as Mr. Kenyatta. But the question is, if the president had not been the president, would this outcome be different? Would this case have ended differently? Would we be in trial right now?
Well, I wouldn't. I hadn't thought about that. I mean, it's such an ambush, but it's just because
I'm a good interview.
Well, it's just because. It's just because it would be quite speculative of me. I really want to believe in a decision that has been founded by the court until that decision is tested, maybe at an appellate process, to find it otherwise. But I really want to believe in the court process and just say it was the fairness of the court. But I wanted to go back to the issue that you had been talking about related to the application by Bensouda on non-compliance, which she earlier on applied, and the court, even in the final finding upon withdrawal, has actually made a decision with regard to that. I really just wanted to add that unless she brings out a totally different angle and she brings out any additional compelling evidence to show that really there is that non-compliance, I haven't been able to get into the details of how her application looks like. Then, of course, we would definitely be seeing a similar result. I don't think then we would expect a different. But that would, of course, be subject to us interrogating what is the detail of what took place.
Professor, given the nature of this case, let me just repeat that question. And I know I'm asking you to be speculative here, but if the president had not been President Kenyatta and Mr. Kenyatta instead, do you think it would have made a difference?
Not much. Don't forget that the president was not president for at least 5 years when this case was going on. Yes. And the evidence that has been presented is no different from what it was before he became president. The argument that he's stopping the evidence because he's the president then raises the question, what stopped the ICC getting those documents before he became president? Because he had no control on these things.
Okay.
So I don't think it would be much different in the...
And to add on that, Edith, the trial judges said clearly, if the Bensouda said clearly, that Kenyatta, Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta, did not interfere with anybody collecting this evidence from 2008. It was broadcast live worldwide. So if Besuda has a bond with Kenya as a Republican state party, welcome. This is very good. Let her bring it to the State Assembly. The State Assembly is an organization which is political. That's why I come in, not like you lawyers. It's a political organ. I come with, this is where we actually, in New York, I did not want to arrive there because Fatu was very angry with some of us. But if it comes on the floor of the State Assembly in the plenary, people are going to bring this evidence. How? Fatu Besuda. So the best method, it goes back to what we have said before. Kenya should create what we call in conflict resolution, redemption strategy. Start now. Have the special division of the High Court working. This Fatu will keep quiet because once she sees us bringing people from industrial area prison to stand a trial and then go back, people will keep quiet.
Okay, let's not get the issues mixed here.
Yes.
But let me look at some of the responses that we're getting on our social media feed.
Yes.
Meshak Nyaundi is saying terminating ICC cases is okay, but what about the victims' justice? Professor Macharia, let me pick your mind on that because we've had two separate opinions on that.
No, there is a bit of confusion here. That you accuse somebody falsely or without evidence, and then you call that justice to the victims. It does not make sense. The justice to the victims requires proper investigation. If there are people who are culpable, they should be properly identified with solid facts to go about it. The victims should be compensated. They should have their properties back, those who are alive, that is, and those who are dead, that's a different matter. But there should be a way of compensating the victims, some sort of reparation, and also for them to see that there is fairness in the whole thing. But I think it's fallacious to accuse somebody wrongly and then call it justice to the victim.
Okay.
That one just doesn't work.
Actually, Stephen Kay said that he would like an apology from the courts. Do you think that this is warranted?
I think it is. And if there was, and I think Matsanga has pointed out, there is, maybe Kenya should take ICC to another court, maybe the ICJ.
And not ICJ, within
itself. The reason I say ICJ, the reason I say ICJ is premised on an assumption. See, ICC behaves as if it is a state, and an overall state. And I know ICJ is for states. So if it behaves like a state, you treat it like a state. And so Kenya should take this supposed state to the ICJ.
The ICJ.
For wrong conduct.
There's an interesting point of view, Gertrude. I don't know what your view on this is.
Well, I wanted to, first of all, just say there is definitely a mess from the prosecution side, especially when you look at it in terms of victims' reparations. And but you cannot again wish away that the fact that by prosecuting there is a way in which if there is justice served, at the end of it, it's justice for the victims. I was actually going into picking the papers because I really was resonating with part of the statement that the president made after the decision. And I just the last bit of it that relates to the victims, he said, I have supported these efforts because ultimately the victims must get justice. And then he says, the world may have failed them, but they will not be let down at home. And at home is really here. And that's where we keep on insisting that there is a way in which this should be done. It should just not be, we cannot just be voicing it and not saying. And I went back, Edith, to think about the issue the question that you raised in relation to if the president, if Uhuru Kenyatta wasn't president, would the verdict have been different? And I think in many ways you can actually look at it and say it may have been different. One of the things is that this is the most powerful Kenyan we have, and facing, by that you actually want to look at him by being in charge of the entire governance system, and so he's also in charge of the machinery that is supposed to cooperate with the court. I am not saying that the Kenya government did not cooperate, but are you seeing the position in which he finds himself? Suffice to agree that yes, this had already started taking place, but you want to look at that office and his personality at the moment and when he's before the court. We wouldn't even be talking about it here today if he was actually not the president of Kenya. So that in itself may have, in a way, tilted the scales.
I think I have a different opinion on that. Some of us started talking about this case 2008, 2009, when Uhuru was not anywhere. Uhuru was a common MP, a member of parliament for Gatundu, and nobody, we still maintained that there was...
Well, no, he was also he had just stepped down as the Minister of Finance, and he was the Deputy Prime Minister.
Fine. We talked about it, and we said the cases. In fact, the case of Uhuru crumbled the first day that Mr. Ocampo, Fatou Bensouda withdrew Muthaura's case. That day they should have gone, all of them, home. But because of political expedience, which Ocampo says, there was political pressure from some place. They held on Uhuru. But there is one thing that nags me about this victim issue. We saw 154 victims added. Maybe Gertrude will give me something here. 154 new victims added by Fago Gaina, the victim's lawyer of Uhuru Kenyatta, just towards October. He came here, drank wine, drank what? Collected everything, and these are new political victims. These are not the real. I have followed that story. I filed an application to the court to challenge to the trial chamber to say the 154 new victims are political victims. Some of the scars are of 1992. They are not the real victims, because the real victims in Kenya have already resettled. Kenya government has tried with Chitio Sharia, as you say. You have resettled them. When I looked at Mr. Gaina's transactions in Kenya, I alerted the court. These new victims were being paid 25,000 shillings through M-Pesa transactions, which I put in the court. So which victims are these? Maybe
let's give Gertrude a chance to respond.
Who are these victims?
Because Matsanga is saying he reads this as sinister, that Fago Gaina enjoined towards the end of the case over 100 more complainants.
Well, this is... and you want to actually look at the entire criminal justice system, that the role of victims is actually very limited. In fact, unlike the ICC process, which of course allows minimal participation of victims through the common legal representative, in our situation here in Kenya, you actually have victims not even having, standing within the court process. So one of the things that makes it even more interesting and different is that at least victims have a role through the participation of the common legal representatives. These additional victims that have been put by the lawyer for by the common representative for victims, it has to be determined on his own basis of additional victims. I really have not interrogated them as victims, political or otherwise. Those are just, in fact, for me, what we have as victims under this case, particularly even now the surviving Ruto and Sang case and the just withdrawn president's case, both those two cases have very minimal, minimal bearing on the number of victims, because the victims of the case are quite limited. But you have the victims of the entire situation of post-election violence, who are many, and maybe those are the ones the common legal representative has gone to pick even more to add on to the case. Yes. But there are still many, and they're out here, but they are not included within the cases that are ongoing.
Okay, yeah. Professor, we're running out of time. So finally, what do you think is next with regard to, you know, international crimes, with regard to Kenya, the ICC? Looking at it critically, what's your assessment?
I think, as I was saying, the ICC as a whole, there is need for a fresh rethink and minimize political interference. Clearly, the Kenyan case was just international political maneuvers, and with the clear objective as to who to fix and not to fix. And that's why they botched the whole thing. So if the ICC, the Rome Statute, the state parties can come together and say they should not want to see this kind of thing happen again, that when they go to a case, it is genuine, and that there will be no political issues being raised, because the people doing it do have ulterior motives. And unfortunately, the ICC has appeared to be targeting Africans, to have ulterior motives, to be doing the bidding of the Euro powers, and that is not a very good image. So it does need a rethink, a restructuring, so that it can become credible, and in future we shall not be discussing these sort of things, because it will be self-evident. Yeah.
All right. That's why we wrap up this discussion, very heated one. If you missed it, we're very sorry for you. But luckily, guess what? It's going to be on YouTube very soon. So do log on to www.youtube.com/KTN Kenya. In studio with me, I did have Macharia Munene, Professor Macharia Munene, who is a lecturer, Gertrude Dangote, who is a lawyer with Kituo cha Sheria, and Dr. David Matsanga, who is a chairman and CEO of Africa World Media. Thank you very much for making time to be with us this morning.
Thank you.
Now, KTN's Morning Express is going nowhere. We're simply taking a short commercial break. And when we come back, I will tell you the story of 16 young people who are crazy. They imagined that in 48 hours, they could not only write, come up with, direct, and produce an entire film, which some people take years to do, but they decided they're going to do it in 48 hours. We'll be speaking to three of them shortly. Barbara Karuana, Jenny Muigai, and Sarah Hassan are in studio. We'll be back with them.